During Tuesday's press briefing, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the White House encourages all tech platforms to do enough to combat COVID misinformation. This was in response to a question concerning the Joe Rogan Spotify controversy. Let's watch.
Last week, the Surgeon General also was asked on MSNBC about Joe Rogan's vaccine comments on Spotify, and he said that tech companies have an important role to play in stopping misinformation because they are the predominant places where misinformation spreads. Spotify is putting out advisory warnings on episodes that have to do with COVID-19. Does the White House and the administration think this is a satisfactory step, or do you think that companies like Spotify should go further than just putting a label on there to say, hey, go do your own, check this out. There's more research you can look at, scientific research regarding COVID.
Sure. Well, last July, you probably know, but the Surgeon General also took the unprecedented step to issue an advisory on the risk of misinformation in public health, which is a very significant step. And amid that, he talked about the role social media platforms have. So our hope is that all major tech platforms and all major news sources, for that matter, be responsible and be vigilant to ensure the American people have access to accurate information on something as significant as COVID-19. That certainly includes Spotify. So this disclaimer, it's a positive step, but we want every platform to continue doing more to call out mis and disinformation while also uplifting accurate information.
Psaki's comments spurred outrage, particularly among the right. But here's Tucker Carlson's reaction. Take a look at this.
There's more that can be done. Hey, you little fascist, that's a threat. That's exactly what it is. Politicians and their spokes-chicks didn't used to talk this way. They were not allowed to talk this way because the First Amendment explicitly prohibits it. You're not allowed to use government power to shut down broadcasters who criticize you, period. And now that's exactly what they're trying to do. So far, Joe Rogan's employer, Spotify, hasn't caved to the pressure. Rogan still has a job, but the company is bending. It's deleted more than 20,000 COVID-related podcast episodes made by other Spotify hosts. Spotify claims they, quote, cause harm. How exactly can a podcast cause harm?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with. I agree.
He's right.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, look, with Jen Psaki, what she originally said, I think what she was beginning to say was accurate. She said, well, the government and the Surgeon General will do more to try to make sure that every American has access to accurate information. I think that's fair enough to make sure people have access to information. But then for her to go on and say, and then these platforms need to do more to combat misinformation, and when the government is telling these private companies and private citizens to do more to censor, how is that not an infringement on the First Amendment?
Right.
I think it is.
It is.
Like I actually think that what she did from the podium there is unconstitutional.
Right.
Because Spotify needs the federal government for all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
FTC, licenses, disputes that it's going to have. It lobbies the federal government. It's a very IP and policy dependent business.
Yeah.
It could be crushed by a government that was like, you know what, the way that you rip off artists isn't going to fly anymore. You're done.
Yeah, I think people in their criticisms, legitimate criticisms often, of how tech platforms handle speech-related questions, there's a lot of focus on the platform, like why is Facebook doing this? Why is Spotify doing this? Why is YouTube doing this? That often misses the government responsibility. Well, or that they shouldn't do these things. But it's very hard to set, because these companies also have First Amendment rights. They can kick, they're not required to host certain people. They can make decisions we don't like, all of that stuff. Now, we don't have to like those decisions. We can complain about them when we do. What we can, in theory, control is the government side. The government, like Spotify can get rid of Joe Rogan if it wants. It can get rid of Neil Young if it wants. Like, it is legally allowed to do all those things. The government, on the other hand, is not permitted to force them to do things, and is getting up against the forcing right now with this kind of threatening. We can stop, in theory. We have prohibited through the First Amendment the government from doing these kinds of things, and that's where a lot of the focus of responsibility should be, more so than it has been.
Yeah, and the press plays an interesting role here, and I used to be critical under the Trump administration when the press would kind of goad Trump into pledging to do illegal things, like, hey, Congress didn't fund your wall, you going to build it anyway? Trump's like, you darn right, I'm going to build that wall anyway. It's like, so as a reporter, like you had the ability basically to get Trump to do anything by just goading him into saying it. And so because the press is also enshrined within the First Amendment, there seems to be some responsibility that the press has as an institution to defend the First Amendment broadly. And so even to say, don't you think that you should be, has Spotify done enough? Like, ask whatever you want of a press secretary, but know that you're pushing up against the bounds of the First Amendment there. And the First Amendment isn't worth the paper that it's written on. It's worth the cultural value and the cultural protection that it has. And so if you erode those cultural protections, you erode the First Amendment and you erode your own press freedoms.
Yeah.
Well, we've already seen how the press behaves with Julian Assange. I mean, we've already seen, we already had the glimpses of much of the press not being willing to actually defend press freedom with their behavior with Julian Assange. And now that has reeled even further culturally, as you're talking about, Ryan, into this now, the press actually calling out press, saying, we don't like your press, and you should stop that press. And we want different press and only ours. We have totally and completely eroded that First Amendment that the press should be, and we, the people, should be defending and saying, no, we want all of the information. And then we get to pick and choose which one we're going to believe. And that's why I say, with Jen Psaki, if she wants to say, well, the Surgeon General wants to make sure that people have access to this particular, the government information. Okay, fine, fair enough. But we should have access to all the other information as well. But the fact that so many in the press are calling for censorship of what they deem to be misinformation, which is so often not, is alarming, beyond alarming. But we did see the first glimpses of this in their lack of defense for Julian Assange. And now look at where we are.
Right. And so Spotify is going to feel that pressure, and that's government pressure, which to me is a pretty clear violation of the First Amendment.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back with more Rising in just a minute. Stay with us.